You're listening to In Pursuit of Community with Elevate Branson. This episode is brought to you by Neighbors Hub, great food for a great cause. Enjoy made-to-order personal pizzas and fresh chopped salads every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., located at 310 Gretna Road, Branson, Missouri. Dine in for excellent food and know that you're supporting an excellent cause. All proceeds generated through Neighbors Hub directly support Elevate Branson programs and services.
I'm Bryan Stallings, the CEO and co-founder of Elevate Branson, and you're listening to In Pursuit of Community, the Elevate Branson Story, Part 1. I've got my favorite guest here with me today. She and I go back a long ways. This is my lovely and beautiful wife, Amy Stallings. Thank you for being my first guest on In Pursuit of Community, Amy.
Oh, thank you for being my husband.
You're welcome. I think the whole idea around this podcast is that we're all in pursuit of community. So when you and I decided to pursue this section of our life, it was really out of that desire to have community or build relationships with others that really help lay the groundwork for Elevate Branson, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, when we first started this, well, for one, we didn't know what we were doing and what we were getting into, but you're absolutely right on that.
I think our big goal in this podcast is really to help others avoid the mistakes and pitfalls that we made when you want to do something in your community, and really to help educate you on how we discovered really what worked best for serving in our community. So to give you a kind of an idea that our background, we're pretty messy individuals. Amy and I have children from previous relationships and blended family, and it all started with our desire to serve in our local church. And because of this blended family dynamic, our kids were a little bit messy as well, and it just felt like we were kind of tucked off in the corner of the church. You wanted to serve cookies to new people or something, and they put you
Yeah, I thought it wouldn't be a bad idea to get outside the building and maybe bring some cookies to some of the folks that had visited our church and just welcome them and just say that we appreciate them coming. But that got shut down pretty quick.
Yeah, and I rode a motorcycle and kind of wanted to get a bunch of guys involved in riding motorcycles and getting out and kind of the same thing. I was just kind of indirectly given the message that, good idea, but we don't want you to be the one to do it. I remember the first couple of years of our marriage, the kids were, of course, they thought it was a great idea that we get married before we actually got married. And then once we were married, it was like territorial and there was a lot of infighting. And I remember that first Thanksgiving that we were married, we decided that we would take them all to go serve together. And we went to a church that was putting on a Thanksgiving dinner, and really that's where we discovered that we had people living in the motels. Do you remember that?
Oh, I absolutely remember that, because when we got there, we really wanted to just stand behind a table and pass out food to people. And when we got there, basically they said, well, we've already got people doing that, so just go sit with people and go talk to them. I think we all froze for about 60 seconds, and then we did. We all split up and started talking to people, and definitely out of my comfort zone, but glad that we got to do that.
I think it was probably out of all of our comfort zones, except for maybe mine, because I'm somewhat of an extrovert, so I kind of look forward to being out of my comfort zone a lot. But it was definitely an experience for our kids. I remember when we brought them back home and we kind of talked about it, we debriefed a little bit, we kind of decided that we wanted to do it again next year. Kind of that was our way of serving, doing our one good deed on Thanksgiving and do it again the next year and just do regular life the rest of the time, not really serve anybody because we did it once a year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we felt comfortable that we did something good. We kind of patted ourselves on the back and then thought, well, okay, we'll just do it again next year and see how that goes. And we could just feel confident that we were doing what we were supposed to do at that point.
So after that first time that we served at the Thanksgiving dinner, I remember the next couple of years kind of looking for that opportunity again. They didn't have it. God kind of put it on your heart, or was it my heart?
I don't remember.
Or both of ours?
Could be our heart.
Yeah, to actually put a Thanksgiving dinner on. It was 2008, and it was right at the start of the recession. And I had actually just shifted careers for the first couple of years prior to that. I was selling Branson Real Estate in California, and it was at the real estate bubble. It was a great time to do that. And then the bubble burst, and I went to look for a job and landed with our local phone company, CenturyLink. And it was shortly thereafter that you started hearing about massive layoffs across the country. I think you were selling tickets, or were you at the hospital then?
At Branson Tourism Center, I think that's where I was at that time.
And these massive layoffs were going on across the country, and just felt like God called us to maybe put a Thanksgiving dinner on, because we felt really grateful that, one, we were both employed and we weren't feeling some of the effects of the recession. And so we put this first Thanksgiving dinner on. We had about 50 people come, and it was primarily you and I and some members of our small group, and really kind of had this stereotypical lens on that everybody that would come to this dinner was an addict or alcoholic. They were lazy, didn't want to work. I don't know. They were just those people, and it was small enough dinner that we actually got to sit down with them and just have conversation. And I remember the biggest takeaway was learning that they were just like you and I, Amy. They were just messy individuals like we were, but they just didn't have a support system around them. So we had friends, we had family around us. So when our kids were in trouble or a car broke down, we had friends or family we could call, and these individuals didn't. And it spiraled them down into a place where they may have ended up in a motel or physically homeless. Do you remember those conversations?
Oh, yeah. And I also remember how taken aback I was with the event, because I, too, was expecting something different. And then when we saw the people that were coming in, and families, and just all different kinds of folks coming in, sitting down and eating, and they were so grateful that they had a place to go and something to eat for Thanksgiving. And we got to sit, and I realized, wow, these are great people. All my stereotypes kind of went out the window. And we got to know some people and really liked the people that were in there, and thought, wow, we can't really wait another year to do something like this again.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway I remember from that first Thanksgiving dinner was just how friendly and appreciative and grateful the people were, which blew me away, because I expected more of an entitled attitude, but they were just so thankful. And so after that first Thanksgiving dinner, I know we looked at all of our qualifications and we said, oh, let's start a ministry, or let's start an outreach program. That's not what we did, is it?
No. Had we done that, we probably wouldn't have done that. So,
it's funny because it's just the story in the Bible, right? Of God's story of how he doesn't ever take the qualified people. If you look at Paul was, going through the New Testament, and prior to him seeing Jesus on the road to Damascus, he was the total opposite of what you'd expect for a Christ follower. And I think that's where we were. We were so messy that we were not qualified to be a ministry or people serving others. And so I think that we're just another example of how God uses ordinary dysfunctional people to do his mission. So I remember going after that first Thanksgiving dinner, looking online and trying to figure out, okay, how can we do something sooner than Thanksgiving, and looking at food trucks and looking at delivering hot meals and all that. And we ended up landing on a sack lunch meal, because in our small group, the previous owner of McDonald's offered to give us buns because he was in our small group.
Right.
And so we just landed on making these sack lunch meals and taking them to a motel. And
free buns.
Yeah, so we thought, we had no idea what we were doing when we made 48 sandwiches in our kitchen, and we packed them up in little bags, and I think it was you and me and our daughter Brooke.
Right.
And we went to that first motel, and we started knocking on doors and passing them out. And people would look at us when they opened the door really funny, like, what are you doing here? And we'd say, we have this bag of meal, and we just want to give it, this bag of food, we just want to give it to you. It was really awkward and uncomfortable, wouldn't you say?
I would clearly say awkward and uncomfortable, because nobody had done that before. And so here's two people just knocking on a door with a bag of food, and the recipients are looking at us like, what's the catch? There's got to be a catch. Like, why would somebody do that without some kind of catch? But we're just like, nope, no catch. We just want to give you some food and get to know you.
I remember after that first night of doing that, we we talked about, oh man, we got to have some kind of icebreaker. This is really awkward. And so because we got the hamburger buns from McDonald's, we drew a happy face on the sack. And the next week when we went and did this, we called them Happy Meals.
Well, plus we weren't very artistic, so it's pretty easy to make a smiley face.
That's true. We kind of had two different perspectives on that. I remember you telling me, and I just found this out like a couple of years ago when we were telling this story to somebody, because I thought we were like, had the same vision of going out there and delivering these meals, and that God had called us into that. And you kind of had told me you didn't hear God tell you that.
No, but I'm also a major introvert, and so anything that's like that, where I'm going outside of my comfort zone, I get pretty just nervous about. And so all of this was completely out of my comfort zone. So I'm just grateful God took me one little step at a time. He didn't show me the whole picture in the beginning. And so I was able to just knock on a door and hand somebody a meal. As awkward as that seemed, it got less awkward as time went on. And before you knew it, it became very comfortable because the folks we were giving the meals to started to become our friends.
Yeah. And of course, a big part of this too was reading that book by Shane Claiborne.
Mm-hmm. Irresistible
Revolution. That's right. It was a revelation too. I can tell you that. But in that, we had been going to church for a while and just felt like, you kind of sit there on Sunday mornings in church and you expect to have this intense connection with God. And oftentimes you don't, you walk away going, yeah, it sounded good and I learned all that, but I didn't really feel God's presence. And, in the book, Shane really talked about if you want to find God, you'll find God among the poor. And so when we started doing that, it was really kind of also this quest to find God. And so I remember, just being out there, delivering meals, meeting our neighbors, building a relationship with them, and yet hearing how God was moving and grooving through that process. So just some incredible stories. I remember, so we were located right across the street from a Walmart at that time. And so I remember we'd go over there, we'd buy a bunch of sleeping bags so that we had them on hand to give to people that needed them when they were cold. And it wasn't but maybe a week or two later, we get a call from Walmart. Hey, all those sleeping bags you're buying, people are bringing them back and getting the money for them, turning them
Right.
back in.
Who knew?
So then we had to cross out the barcodes on them so they couldn't do that. And
Right.
man, we made a lot of mistakes in those
Right.
early
I mean,
years.
our hearts were in the right place, but we didn't understand that sometimes by helping, you're actually hurting people, you're enabling, and we didn't understand that piece until we were doing it quite a bit. And then we started to just think, there's got to be a better way to do what we're doing that doesn't feel like wrong.
Yeah, and we didn't understand anything about poverty or addiction.
No.
I remember the first few times we would go deliver meals to somebody in a motel room, and you just strike up conversation. You'd say, hey, how's your day going? How's your week going? Or whatever. And you'd get a long dissertation of a story, but the story would be all over the place. It'd be like trying to follow this bouncing ball going in all kinds of directions. 5 minutes later, you're emotionally exhausted and mentally and emotionally exhausted from trying to follow the story.
Right.
And just not understanding anything about poverty or addiction culture for that matter. And so we've definitely learned years worth of experiences have really created some good learnings for us.
That's probably about the time that we started to research how to help people in poverty and read different books and talk to different people that had done it before and kind of knew what they were doing. And I think at that point, things shifted with our outreach, and we wanted to develop ways for people to receive the things they needed, but not just get a handout, but to be a part of earning what that is.
Part of that poverty culture, too, was everything was an emergency. And I'm the fixer, right? So I remember your phone number was what was published out there. The calls would come into you,
Right.
and I'd be like, hey, you need to call that person back like right away. And your response to me was always, I'm going to give it a little bit of time because they usually will figure it out, which is always what happened,
Right.
give it 24 hours and the problem is solved before you try to jump in and fix it.
Right. We don't need to be the heroes, and people don't just fall out of the sky with a bunch of issues. We're not there to just swoop in and fix everything that they're struggling with, because again, that strips away dignity, and that makes us kind of the hero and them the ones being saved, and that's not what we determined we wanted to do.
And I think that was one of the hardest takeaways for me, was when I started engaging in relationship or having conversations with our neighbors, not fixing the problems, right? Because the natural instinct makes sense. Here's what you do, A, B, C, and you fix the problem. It was really just being with them. And that's all they wanted. They didn't necessarily want you to fix their problem. They just wanted somebody to hear them, to be acknowledged, to be noticed, and be in relationship with them, and
to feel valued.
Yeah, and that's what we found out. And then when it did come time to help someone, it was helping them through empowering them, helping them walk alongside with them, but not doing for them.
Right.
And that was some of the biggest things that we really took away from some of those early days. So much so that when we started Elevate Branson, we really had some core values that we really learned. And one of the things in Branson, we have a large working poor population that lives in motels who are very unseen. You go to a lot of big cities and you'll see homeless individuals that are on park benches on the streets, maybe on the street corners. But in Branson, you didn't necessarily see that. They were hidden. They were out of view. Part of that, I think, is because we get so many tourists here. Part of that also is because they were actually working, and they weren't necessarily homeless. They were just houseless, and they were just working poor. Once they got trapped in a motel, they couldn't get out.
And these are folks that are at Walmart. They're the cashiers. They're the waiters and wait staff at restaurants. I mean, you could see people walking down the street. I didn't realize that they were going to a motel where they lived. I guess I just never gave it a lot of thought. You just see people walking around, and it just never dawned on me that was the situation, that they were living in the weekly stays, and they were struggling, and oftentimes they had no support system. And it was really just difficult for a lot of people in our community. Still is.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us today and listening to our first podcast. To hear more of our story, join us for part 2 of In Pursuit of Community, the Elevate Branson Story.